Part 1. A sudden incident at the airport. Right when John F. Kennedy International Airport, JFK, was at its busiest, with crowds packed shoulder to shoulder and the overhead speakers constantly reminding passengers to keep order, an unexpected sound of fierce barking suddenly rang out, freezing everyone at the security checkpoint. In an instant, it was as though all other noises were swallowed up. Every eye turned toward one spot, a woman standing at the end of the line looking perplexed. But her confusion wasn't about the commotion. It stemmed from a K9 unit dog growling and barking nonstop at her. People began to whisper among themselves. In an airport, everyone is always in a hurry, but when a security dog keeps barking like that, it's no small matter. Transportation Security Administration, TSA, agents converged from all sides. The announcements paused. The security team halted the flow of passengers going through the checkpoint. No one needed to say it out loud. Everyone realized something was wrong. In under a minute, the bustling checkpoint turned eerily silent, as though someone had cut off the oxygen. The woman, around her early 30s, dressed simply, lowered her head, saying something lost in the tension-filled air. She wasn't resisting or running. But the dog kept growling, keeping close, eyes never leaving her for a second. This was Bruno the K9, famed for its keen nose. 6 years on the job, never a false alert. From uncovering illicit substances and homemade devices to tracing hidden valuables, Bruno sniffed them all out. It never reacted to random human emotions. It barked only when it sensed genuine danger. So what had Bruno discovered today? That question burned in the minds of every security officer. Terrorism, smuggling, or a mule unwittingly carrying contraband? But if so, why was the target a pregnant woman? A young TSA officer, unable to contain himself, approached the woman, speaking quietly into his radio. She answered faintly, not very clear. When her eyes met Bruno's, something flickered across her face. Not exactly fear, more like helplessness, as if she herself couldn't grasp what was happening. Curious murmurs spread. Nearby passengers backed away, wary. A few grew irritated at the delay but didn't dare speak up. In the tense, drawn-out atmosphere, all attention narrowed in on this pregnant woman and the dog that would not stop barking. Part 2. A difficult decision and medical suspicion. In the airport surveillance center, cameras pivoted, zooming in on the scene. Chief Orton, who oversaw security at the checkpoint, left his monitors and headed out to assess the situation. He knew Bruno all too well. The dog never falsely alerted on something trivial. But today Bruno's eyes weren't wild or aggressive. They were resolute, as if battling against time. A TSA officer by the baggage scanner whispered, "Her bag seems fine. No suspicious item." Orton didn't respond. He observed the situation in silence. 1 minute, 2 minutes. His silence confirmed what everyone already suspected. There was indeed a problem. Behind the rows of waiting seats, an older woman muttered, "Poor young lady. Maybe she's just unlucky." But no one replied, because there's no room for guesswork in airport security. It's black or white, safe or unsafe. If a K9 is persistently signaling, even a pregnant passenger can't automatically be cleared. TSA staff exchanged uneasy looks, silently aware of the risk. If they overreacted without solid proof, they could be sued and hammered by the media. Yet if they ignored the alert and Bruno turned out to be correct, the fallout would be disastrous. A young female officer suggested, could the dog be mistaken because of some hormonal change during pregnancy? Even she didn't seem convinced by her own words. So the standoff persisted. No one dared to advance, yet no one dared to retreat. The pregnant woman, for her part, stayed silent, waiting as though a verdict was about to be handed down by the strangers who viewed her as a potential threat. Suddenly Bruno's barks grew louder, his ears pricked. He stepped back, then stepped forward again. Without waiting for orders, another officer radioed in, requesting permission to take the woman to a private screening room. No one objected, no one would. The decision fell to Orton. He nodded. And in that moment, Bruno's eyes flashed with something beyond mere vigilance. An urgency suggesting something very serious was imminent, and the dog alone sensed it. Outside the checkpoint, the line of passengers began moving again. It felt like the incident had ended, but those who remained knew it was just the start of something mysterious. A boundary, an instinct, perhaps a life on the line, or maybe two. Part 3. In the private screening room, and a dangerous signal. Not a word was spoken after the door to the private screening room closed. There was no shouting, no angry protests typical of people who feel wrongly accused. No one demanded a phone call or threatened to call a lawyer. The silence was odd, and that in itself bothered Orton more than anything. He paused outside briefly, peering through the frosted window at the woman seated inside. Bruno lay at the doorway, eyes pinned on the spot as if trying to see right through the wall. Orton knew that one misjudgment now could have grave consequences, not just for him but for the entire security crew. The media wouldn't wait for a formal investigation. Just a photo of a pregnant woman surrounded by TSA agents could spark public outrage. Still, he walked in anyway. There was only a small fabric bag on the table, lightweight, with nothing suspicious upon scanning. The X-ray had come back clear, twice. Yet Bruno wouldn't let it go. Orton had never seen him behave like this, constantly barking and growling for more than 10 minutes, even away from the crowd. The woman remained silent. A female officer asked if she was okay. She replied briefly, "I'm fine." Then she lapsed into quiet again. She truly seemed clueless about what was happening, or else she was hiding something she herself couldn't face. Orton studied her eyes. There was no shiftiness, no calculation, just exhaustion, the kind that suggests she'd been worn down long before arriving at the airport. He radioed for 2 more female officers. No one enjoyed doing this, but they had no choice. Outside, Bruno began to whine softly. It wasn't barking, more like a distress call. Orton recognized it as the sound of worry. In all the incidents he'd handled, Bruno had never done this. Even with big busts involving drugs, the dog barked a few times and sat to wait for direction. But now it seemed Bruno couldn't stand being separated from the pregnant woman. One of the female officers glanced at Orton with concern. "She's shaking, but not from panic. She doesn't act like someone smuggling contraband." Orton gave no reply. His thoughts drifted to another possibility he'd barely considered in a decade of service. What if the danger didn't come from a weapon or drugs but from her own body? Part 4. Turning to emergency care. The thought struck him like lightning, sending a chill down his spine. Orton stepped back into the hallway and pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes from an advanced K9 training course. A Japanese specialist had once mentioned a rare case of a dog detecting cancer in a person, not through formal training but by instinct alone. It was so uncommon that it wasn't officially taught. He'd shrugged it off back then as a curious anecdote. Now, however, a TSA officer emerged from the screening room. "She's starting to have trouble breathing. Should we call a medic?" It was a simple question, but for Orton it was the final push. He hurried back inside. The woman sat there, pale, one hand on her stomach. The officers had paused the search, uncertain what to do. This was no longer a security issue, but a medical emergency. Orton grabbed his radio. "Request airport medical, code red. Possible urgent health risk." People sprang into action. A female officer crouched beside the woman, speaking gently. She was too weak to respond. Meanwhile, just beyond the door, Bruno let out soft whines. Orton had never seen him like this before. He didn't need any more proof. He just knew he had to trust his gut, and Bruno's. The airport medical team arrived swiftly and performed a quick exam. One medic looked up, alarmed. Blood pressures crashing, fetal heartbeat unclear. "This is serious." That pronouncement made everyone freeze for a moment. Orton exchanged glances with Bruno. The dog went silent, but his attention on the woman was laser-focused. The mission was no longer about searching for contraband, it was about saving 2 lives, and the first one to notice had been a dog. Within seconds they had her on a stretcher. She started drifting in and out of consciousness. Staff rushed about, a doctor barked orders to colleagues. Orton watched, perplexed and concerned. They'd done everything by the book, but why had only Bruno spotted the real danger? A nurse pressed a stethoscope to the woman's belly and pulled back quickly, calling for an oxygen tank. "Fetal heartbeat is weak." There was no more doubt or waiting for confirmation. A critical evacuation protocol was launched. Orton followed the medics to the ambulance. Another TSA colleague put Bruno in a security vehicle right behind them, because Bruno refused to stay behind. Part 5. The race to the hospital and tense waiting. The rear doors of the airport swung open for the ambulance to speed out. Orton found himself climbing aboard without hesitation, even though he wasn't family. Maybe it was his uniform or maybe it was the determination on his face. No one questioned it. Inside, everything moved fast like a film on fast forward. Machines beeped with her vitals. One medic administered N4, another gripped the woman's hand, each move a vital link in fighting for her life. Orton checked his phone, no new calls, no messages. His mind still reeled. How did a routine security check end like this? The ambulance swerved hard off the Van Wyck Expressway onto a major avenue near the hospital. The senior doctor glanced at Orton. "Call the hospital. Tell them we suspect uterine rupture and possible internal bleeding. Orton obeyed instantly, not pausing for questions. Meanwhile, Bruno was in another car close behind. The driver phoned Orton, shouting over the traffic. He won't sit still. He's been standing, staring forward the whole ride. Orton simply said, "Just bring him." The moment the ambulance arrived, the doors flew open. Medics wheeled the stretcher into the ER. Orton was barred from going in any further and could only see glimpses of white coats dashing around. He peeked through the glass doors and saw the mother-to-be convulse slightly as a nurse hooked up an IV drip. Outside, Bruno and his escort pulled up. The dog bounded out, but it wasn't allowed inside. It slumped onto the ground near the door, eyes fixed on that glass barrier as though it fully understood what was happening inside. No one asked Orton why he was there, or why a TSA K9 was in the hospital corridor. The doctors and nurses only spared them the occasional glance, each busy with their own life-saving task. Orton sat on a bench, leaning against the wall. He'd faced countless suspects, drug traffickers, armed individuals, but never had he felt so powerless. He wasn't afraid of messing up protocol or inciting public outrage. He was afraid that if he hadn't trusted Bruno, 2 lives might already have been lost. Time ticked by painfully. One nurse rushed out for more blood bags. Another doctor hurried in from another wing. You could see how urgent the situation was just by watching their pace. Bruno lay there, still as stone, head on his paws. Everyone who passed felt the tension that only people awaiting life and death news can truly know. For another hour, Orton stayed. Occasionally he looked at Bruno, then back at the closed doors of the operating room. He felt so small in the face of life and death. Another hour slipped away with no updates. The overhead light reading "operating" remained lit. All that was left was faith in the medical team, and the memory of a dog's uncanny intuition. Part 6. A Miracle and a Life Saved. Time dragged on. 2 hours had passed, and the red in-surgery light was still glowing. Orton sat rigid on that bench, eyes never leaving the sign. Bruno lay motionless nearby, as if frozen in place. Then finally the sign went dark. Orton's heart leapt. The operating room door swung open, revealing a young nurse holding a tray still stained with dried blood. She paused and gave Bruno a small smile, so brief that anyone could have missed it. But for Orton, it was a spark of hope. He heard wheels squeaking coming closer. A different nurse was guiding a hospital bed out of the room. On it lay the woman, alive but unconscious, her face still pale, for lines running into her arm. Nestled alongside her was a newborn in a small warming blanket, wiggling slightly, living proof that both mother and child had made it. Orton felt a massive weight lift off his chest. Bruno rose too, taking a few steps to follow the gurney. This time he didn't bark, he just watched, panting softly. Anyone witnessing that moment felt a lump in their throat. The dog's eyes reflected not aggression but relief. A doctor approached Orton. "She's going up to the recovery ward now. We caught the internal injury just in time, pretty close call." "Just in time," the doctor repeated, and Orton swallowed hard at the realization of how razor-thin that line had been. He followed the hospital bed down the corridor, with Bruno padding close by. Nobody stopped them. People just observed with knowing looks, fully aware that without this K9 team, the hospital might be dealing with a tragedy instead. Part 7. The Meeting and a Heartfelt Thank You. Orton didn't leave the hospital that night. He spent the long hours in the waiting area, dozing off occasionally. Bruno lay curled beneath the bench, watchful. By morning, doctors confirmed that while the mother was still weak, the crisis had passed. The baby was stable too. Early the next day, Orton returned, with Bruno in tow. The moment they reached the second floor, the dog took the lead, heading straight for the door marked Anna Green, the name posted on a whiteboard. Although they hadn't caught her name in the chaos before, now it was there for all to see. A nurse at the door allowed Orton inside. Bruno stayed put, sitting quietly near the entrance as if understanding its job was done. Anna lay on the bed, eyes open, face pale but alert. Beside her was a small bassinet with the newborn, a tangle of tubes and monitors but thankfully stable. Anna looked at Orton, her voice faint but sincere. "Thank you. Thank you both, for saving us." She was still very weak, but the gratitude rang clear. Orton nodded, uncertain what to say. Bruno nosed the edge of the bed, and Anna gently touched the dog's head, trembling slightly, not from fear but from relief and gratitude. She tried to speak more but managed only a whisper. Sometimes words aren't needed. The moment itself speaks volumes. A doctor entered just then, a bit startled to see a K9 by the bedside, but when he recognized Anna's calm relief, He simply nodded and suggested Orton wait outside while he performed a check. Shortly the exam was done, confirming that both mother and child were on the mend. Stepping back into the hall, Orton was met by a senior doctor who patted him on the shoulder. "She's out of danger now. If you'd waited even a little longer, we might not have been able to save them. You and your dog rescued 2 lives." Orton looked at Bruno and lowered his gaze, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened, how it had gone beyond standard security procedures, beyond normal logic. Sometimes the right call comes from instinct, from a dog's unwavering gaze, and from a seemingly irrational decision that, in the end, saved 2 lives. Part 8. Back to routine and final reflections. A week later, Orton was back on shift at JFK. The morning started early. Baggage scanners whirred steadily, crowds trickled in, and flight announcements droned overhead. It was as if nothing out of the ordinary had ever occurred. Bruno, too, lay at his usual station, watching passenger after passenger shuffle past. Only Orton noticed that ever since that day, whenever a pregnant traveler walked through, Bruno's gaze lingered just a moment longer than before. He didn't bark or growl, he simply watched as if listening for something no one else could hear. Orton kept his official report brief. K9 exhibited abnormal alert behavior, leading to the discovery of a critical medical emergency. Coordinated immediate response resulting in rescue. He didn't elaborate on Bruno's uncanny sense or the tense hours in the hospital. Whether people believed it or not was irrelevant. He and Bruno knew the truth. Later that afternoon, as a light rain began falling on New York City, Orton received a text from an unknown number. It contained only a photo, a baby swaddled in a blanket, wide-eyed, tiny hand clutching a soft fabric bracelet. Below it were a few words. "Thank you for not looking away. My baby and I are still here because of you. Hoping we can meet again to say a proper thank you." Orton gazed at the photo for a long while. Bruno cocked his head as if sharing in the moment. Orton let out a rare laugh, a gentle release amidst a day packed with routines. He didn't text back. He didn't need to. What needed doing had already been done. That evening, Orton took Bruno for a slow walk around the airport perimeter. They strolled in silence, though they never really needed words. From that day on, Orton found himself paying closer attention to the seemingly mundane things in life, observing passengers more deeply, and above all, trusting that unspoken instinct that machines can't replicate. He'd learned that sometimes the most important signals come from what can't be precisely measured: a dog's intuition, a fleeting gut feeling, and one decisive moment when you choose to act without all the facts. Some lives don't begin with a cry, but with the silence of an inexplicable instinct. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. It's not just a sudden incident in the bustling flow of JFK Airport, but a gentle and profound reminder of the power of trust, empathy, and instinct, sometimes surpassing even the most rigorous procedures. A single timely decision, a devoted dog's alert, or an unobtrusive act can be enough to save a life. Remarkably, it didn't begin with humans at all, but rather with a quiet, watchful creature who knew what no one else could see. We hope this story touched your heart and reminds you to appreciate the little things, to listen more closely, and to stay kind wherever life takes you. If you've found meaning in it and want to help spread more stories of compassion, please consider giving this a like, leaving a comment, and subscribing. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to continue sharing uplifting stories. Sincere thanks and take care.